Well, we're breaking our budget again, but we wanted to give you the least expensive RTX 5070 Ti build that we could assemble. How much did we go over budget? Well, we're gonna get into all that right here, right now on Robeytech. You know what they say, once you break your $1,000 budget, it gets easier to do it again. I don't know who they are or where they get their information, but in this case, they're not wrong. And neither are we for what we're doing right here. With the launch of the new GPUs, we wanted to put together examples of just how much a new PC with modern components costs and provide step-by-step guides to help with that process. For today's build, we're looking at a $1,600 budget for a killer 1440p rig. And yes, we understand that everyone's budget is different and these GPUs are difficult to get right now, especially at MSRP. But we just want to give you a picture of the leanest machines possible so when the time comes and the price is right, you're ready to rock. And don't worry, we'll still talk about part recommendations, show you where to get the best deals, and reference the live streams for step-by-step instructions on how to build this machine yourself. And I love how successful these videos have been so far. Now, we're still sticking to the rest of our budget build rules, despite our broken budget. So we'll be using our 5-point weight system to show how this budget build is balanced within the following categories. First, price, or how well did we use our budget? And really, since we're breaking the budget, our focus is going to be on the thriftiness of the build. We're also going to talk about CPU power, GPU power, parts and features, things like RGB, CPU cooler, RAM speeds, SSD performance, and finally, the aesthetics. It's got to look good. Also, make sure that you like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss videos on the next budget builds in streams or right here over at Robeytech. All right, this build, as we mentioned, is focused on 1440p performance and some modern features thanks to the RTX 5070 Ti. Now, if you missed our full review of the GPU, you can actually find that right here, but here's what we're focusing on in this build. In a lot of ways, the 5070 Ti is NVIDIA's, you must be this tall to ride measuring stick for 1440p multi-frame generation at higher video quality settings with very, very cinematic titles like your Cyberpunks, your Black McWukons, those sort of things. In other words, if you're looking at any one of the 100+ games that feature NVIDIA's new frame generation, but you want some extra graphical flair, this is the GPU to get. And don't worry, yes, we're gonna have a Radeon RX 9070 XT building coming up very soon for those of you who don't want NVIDIA and wanna go AMD. So for our parts, we're gonna walk through them and talk about our 5 categories along the way. Starting with our CPU and motherboard, we're gonna be using the AMD Ryzen 5 9600X with the Asus TUF Gaming B650 Plus Wi-Fi motherboard. The 9600X is a 6-core 12-thread CPU that provides a solid platform for gaming, and it also gets you into the AM5 platform. As for the motherboard, we're using the same Asus TUF Gaming B650 Plus Wi-Fi motherboard we've been using in our 9800X 3D and RTX 5080 build. So this allows us to shave off a few dollars off of our total while balancing competitive pricing and options. Now, as a reminder, the TUF Gaming B650 Plus offers us a reinforced PCI 4 lane for our GPU, 1 PCI 5 lane, and 2 PCI 4 M.2 slots with heat sinks. It's also got Wi-Fi 6 and so much more. That said, some of its features are a little bit behind current generation motherboards like Wi-Fi 7, PCI 5 GPU, but not so far behind it that you are going to hamstring the system in any way. So our parts and features and CPU power score, well, they're a little bit of an older motherboard with a newer CPU, so this will bring the parts and feature score down ever so slightly, while our CPU score lands squarely in the middle to upper mid-range. As for CPU cooling, we're going to be using the Thermalright Phantom Spirit 120 SE CPU air cooler once again. This thing, you know, it has a nicely sized heatsink, 2 120mm fans to help push air through, it's got addressable RGB, and a price under $40. And like we saw in our Ryzen 7 9800X 3D build, it can keep a Ryzen 9000 series processor cool. And it gives us some upgradability with this system up to a Ryzen 7 9800X 3D if you wanted to do it. So this will help win us back some budget points while also giving us some aesthetic points for the RGB because it looks kind of clean. Now for RAM, we're using the Patriot Viper Venom 6000 Megatransfer CL30 32GB DDR5 kit. Now this is one place where we could save around $10 if we wanted to go with non-RGB, but you can decide if RGB is a must or not. Now the low latency RAM does give us a slight bump on our parts and features, and we can even add a little bit to aesthetic score for actually keeping RGB in the picture. Moving on to our GPU, we're going to be using the Asus Prime Gaming RTX 5070 Ti. This GPU is really what's pushing our budget up. This GPU is supposed to retail for $749. As of a couple days ago, looks like tariffs are starting to impact the cost of Asus GPUs, but could come back down. And on top of being $749 or whatever it costs now, it also sets the bar for 1440p access to NVIDIA's DLSS 4 multi-frame generation, while also laying down some really sweet raw performance as well. So as far as scoring goes, GPU power is going to get a boost, while our budget takes a hit. Now moving on to storage, we're using the Patriot Viper VP4300 Lite NVMe drive. Now on stream, we actually use the 4TB version, but you can save over $100 by stepping down to 2TB, and that's a choice that's going to be up to you. These drives have great read and write speeds that exceed most entry-level PCI 4 drives and are bangers for the price. The other thing is they are lacking DRAM, which could have some impact to the overall gaming performance. So up to you if you want to switch to a DRAM capable NVMe drive. It's very easy swap there. So in our scoring, we're going to add to parts and features since this is a fast drive at a great price, but it's not all the way max given it doesn't have DRAM. Now for our case, we have a new contender. This is the Corsair 3000D Airflow. Now this is a little bit of an older case, but we've seen it for prices as low as $75. It's a little smaller than the Corsair 4000D, comes with 2 pre-installed fans, it's easy to build inside, it's got a generous amount of airflow to feed our CPU cooler, and the price is right for a budget-conscious build. Only bummer, no USB-C front panel, but you know what? For what you pay for, you get, you know what I mean? Now this is where there's a little bit of choose your own adventure in terms of a fork in the road. When we planned this build, we were actually gonna add 2 140mm Thermalright LC C14CS ARGB equipped fans, but they didn't actually show up in time for our build stream. What we actually see here is 120mm versions of those same fans, and it actually saved us around $7 in the overall budget because we just used that pre-installed rear fan, but no RGB. So when we look at the scoring with the case and the fans, the 3000D is at the higher end of the budget-friendly cases, but it's functional, it's very easy to build in, and its aesthetics, I gotta say, are pretty solid. Finally, for PSU, we're shifting gears to a PSU you've seen around Robeytech a lot on the live channel, and that's the Asus Tough Gaming 850-watt gold PSU. We love this PSU for a number of reasons, but one of the reasons that we love it is that this build specifically, it has a 16-pin cable that's rated for 600 watts. So if you wanted to go up to a 5080, you absolutely could do that. Now, when we put all this together, the total cost before taxes and shipping comes in at around $1,630. So if we're gonna score it in our 5 categories, here's where it's all gonna land. CPU power lands in the higher middle range, GPU power lands at the higher end of the higher mid range, parts and features land in the higher mid range. As for aesthetics, we think it's pretty, so we're gonna say upper mid range. And finally, for our budget score, we did break our $1,000 rule, so our score is definitely gonna have to take a hit. However, we kept just about everything else pretty lean, but we could have gone a little leaner by cutting out some RGB and maybe even going to 7000 series, but there you go. All right, so let's talk about performance. Now, if you watched our RTX 5070 Ti review, these numbers are going to look very familiar, and there's a lot of info here as we tested 12 games, so feel free to pause at any point. Also, if you want to look at them more in depth, head on over to Robeytech.com and click on budget builds. You'll see all of the charts and all of the information right there if you want to check it out. Now, these numbers that we're about to show you are averages without DLSS, multi-frame generation, or ray tracing. Again, since this is a 1440p machine, we'll be focusing on those numbers specifically. Starting with Forza Ryzen 5, we saw an average of 187 FPS. Call of Duty Black Ops 6 averaged 210 FPS with basic settings for multiplayer and 132 FPS with extreme settings for campaign. In Marvel Rivals, we saw just over 96. Starfield, we saw an average of 106 frames per second. Indiana Jones averaged around 164. In Cyberpunk 2077, we saw averages of just under 129 FPS. For Warhammer 40K, Space Marine 2, we averaged just over 128. When we jumped into Hogwarts Legacy, we saw an average of over 106 frames per second. Alan Wake 2 averaged over 122 FPS. Black Myth Wukong clocked in with an average of 85. Monster Hunter Wilds joined our testing with an average of just shy of 80 FPS. And finally, for Fortnite at low visual settings, we saw around 263, which was no surprise because Fortnite can pretty much run on a russet potato. Again, these numbers are before we turned on ray tracing, DLSS, and or multi-frame generation. When we started adding in DLSS and ray tracing, the rig handles it like a champ, with our averages hovering over 100 FPS in most titles. Now, when we start looking at multi-frame generation or MFG in this machine, we added DLSS with ray tracing whenever were possible. Check out these examples. Let's start with Hogwarts Legacy. We saw a staggering average of just under 361 at 4 times multi-frame generation. Marvel Rivals, we saw 350 frames per second. Cyberpunk 2077 and Indiana Jones both came in at just under 295. And finally, Alan Wake 2, we saw averages of just under 243. In other words, this thing can pull some beefy frame rates utilizing NVIDIA's multi-frame generation technology, which, if you're okay with the technology, is really impressive. Now, the titles that didn't have the option for MFG, we did perform tests on them with DLSS and normal 2-time frame generation and ray tracing when available. Call of Duty Black Ops 6 with basic settings for multiplayer, we saw 288 FPS and 219 at extreme settings for campaign. For Black Myth Wukong, it came in at 108 frames per second. Starfield, we saw 205 FPS. Monster Hunter Wilds, we saw 88. Forza Horizon 5 at 272. Fortnite came in at just under 242 frames per second. And finally, Warhammer 40K Space Marine 2 averaged 235 frames per second. All in all, with or without multi-frame generation, DLSS, ray tracing, or multi-frame generation, the 5070 Ti is a monster card and performs extremely well in this rig thanks to the headroom offered by the 9600X. Now, gaming performance data is great, but how did our air cooler handle the 9600X? Well, our 9600X stayed cool under full CPU load, setting an average of 66.5 degrees Celsius. As far as the Asus Prime Gaming RTX 5070 Ti, it capped out at around 69 degrees Celsius in firm arc. As for our gaming temps, we saw averages at around 63 on our GPU and 63 degrees on our CPU throughout our testing. Again, this just shows that you can use an air cooler for CPU cooling while also feeding a GPU like the RTX 5070 Ti. Just to wrap this up, all in all, this is a solid 1440p machine with some bells and whistles. There are certainly changes you could make to suit your needs, but this gives you an idea of what you could get for around $1,600 if, of course, you can find a 5070 Ti at or around MSRP. And with that, we're going to close out this rundown of the Robeytech lean, modern, mid-range on a budget PC featuring the AMD Ryzen 5 9600X and NVIDIA RTX 5070 Ti. Now, if you want a central resource for this build, and you want to see all the videos and the links and everything, head over to Robeytech.com. We'll have all of those details, links, videos, everything whenever you're ready to take the plunge. And also, don't forget our in-depth step-by-step live streams that we do for that, and you can check out those videos on there as well. And let us know if you build it yourself. I'd love to know that. And head over to our Robeytech Discord over at discord.gg/Robeytech. We'd love to actually see the build, and if you have questions about it or setting it up, make sure that you check that out and get your questions answered there. Anyway, we're going to be building these systems live over at twitch.tv/Robeytech or over at youtube.com/Robeytech live as well. Anyway, make sure you slap that subscribe button with that like button and ring that notification bell so that you get a notification each and every time we post videos like this right here on Robeytech. And make sure you follow us on all the other social channels, absolutely everywhere. Thank you so much for watching this video, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.